Now stand aside, worthy adversary.
'Tis but a scratch.
A scratch? Your arm's off.
No, it isn't.
Our relationship to water, to rivers, is very different and very distinct from our relationship to land. For example, imagine the changes to the Amazon that have been predicted, going from forest to grassland or savanna. We can probably still see ourselves adapting to that environment. We can see a way of living off of it. That's a very different story when you're talking about a river, because a river's temper, its personality, their nature, defines our ability to live in a region.
On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, the bottom falls out of the Rhine River. Hi, I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to this episode. So we've talked a lot this year about the decline and lowering of rivers, inland rivers in particularly, and how that is impacting global shipping.
It shapes the water we can drink, the crops we can grow, the cities, industry we can have, and depending on a river, the shipping options on it. I don't quite know if we understand or have internalized that the changes we have been seeing are very much a change in their temperament. Consider the events on the Mississippi over the last few summers.
The Mississippi River is drying up. Water levels are approaching record lows. Barges are getting stuck on sandbars in unprecedented numbers. Many ports and docks no longer have water deep enough for commercial boats to safely reach them. And this is a problem for the whole country.
The Mississippi is many things, but one thing it definitely is the absolute artery and backbone for the U.S. Eastern economy. The mighty Mississippi ebbs and flows according to the season, as all rivers really do. But I don't know if the eastern half of the U.S. has quite come to terms that the last few years are not an anomaly. One way or another, the economy of the Mississippi watershed and the world beyond will be reshaped by this reality in ways both large and small. And this is true of every economy in the watersheds they inhabit. But even what we see now is, even if we start thinking of it as climate change, is not climate change. It's only this decade's stage of it. And that process is not some linear pathway to a particular destination or state. This is especially true of the river basins that support and give life to the Asian economies. They receive a great bulk of their water yearly in liquid form from monsoons, which also happen to contribute to the melting of the snowpacks and glaciers dotting the Himalayas, the Tibetan Plateau, and the Hindu Kush.
On October 4th, 2023, a devastating glacial lake outburst struck North Sikkim, sending shockwaves across the northeastern state. The lake outburst occurred in Lonak Lake in North Sikkim, resulting in a sudden and alarming rise in the water level of the Teesta River. At least 30 people have been reported missing in flash floods.
As climate changes, the nature and the proportion of those kinds of sources of water, whether it's rain, snow melt, it's going to change each river's personality, and quite likely dramatically. The changes are going to include much more water delivered as torrential deluges, like we've seen over the last few months. Outside of the monsoon season, however, most rivers are sustained by a combination of glacial ice melt and snowpack melt. The trend or the fate of glaciers in the Himalayas and in Tibet and the Hindu Kush has been widely reported. Currently, they're actually delivering more water than usual than in decades past because they are rapidly melting. eventually that contribution is going to fade away. Unique to every watershed will be the future of snowpack. Rivers that are facing an ocean and are receiving moist air off of a much warmer world will probably enjoy more snowpack and can expect to be sustained in compensation for the loss of any glaciers. At least in part, other watersheds won't be quite so lucky because of their position relative to things like oceans and prevailing winds. They're going to be left out high and dry. Their snowpack is going to diminish along with the glaciers. And I truly hope that they can find a solution to this circumstance because civilization is a little bit challenging without water. I'll just leave it that way. A river's personality is a product of its watershed. It's a combination of its geology and of the climate itself. A watershed's geological placement determines the bounty of water it may net from winds. As they flow into mountain ranges, they push air up the mountain sides, forcing it to cool, causing any water vapor it has to fall as rain or snow on their slopes. An important point here is that any air that has flowed over a mountain range has been stripped of most of its moisture. Everything else downstream of it gets bunk. But as all things that go up must come down, the air returning to higher latitudes is depleted of water in one way or another. This bone-dry air descends back to the earth at latitudes arid for this reason. A warmer climate also amplifies evaporation. Over land, this means water is sucked from soil, plants, reservoirs, people, and hot air mops it up like a truckload of ShamWow. In some regions, this has led to the phenomena of flash drought, where heat leaches soil of water so quickly, drought conditions develop in days or a few weeks. And of course, this extra water will eventually come down in buckets elsewhere. The polar jet streams themselves are a very different kind of river, and because of climate change, they've gone from being swift, tidy, orderly flows to something that we might think of as a little more Mississippi-like. The jet stream has slowed down, and as a consequence, it now meanders. This pattern is very stable, and it has resulted in the persistent heat domes and also the atmospheric rivers that have been bringing what feels like biblical flooding all over the world. With all these changes, I hope you can see what this can mean for a river basin, especially in Asia. The water sustaining a river will come far more in liquid form in the rainy season. And when that rainy season comes, it's going to come down in buckets. You only have to look at the news of the last couple of years. Outside of a rainy season, rivers are often sustained by snow and ice melt. So long as glaciers last, ice melt lakes from the rapid melting they are enduring will spawn massive floods. The world's ice sheets are declining, and they are going to either completely disappear or be reduced in size to the point where they can't really contribute to any water flow in a river at all. But the other consequence of climate changing will be some river basins seeing quite a lot more snow. We can think of what happened in the U.S. West this year, previous winter actually, where a 25-year drought was erased throughout most of the U.S. West. by an atmospheric river that delivered, in some cases, 3 to 4 times the average seasonal snowfall over a very brief period of time. Unfortunately for us, that's allowed a lot of reservoirs to be recharged. Doesn't necessarily patch up the groundwater issues, but it's helpful. But other places are not going to see that. They will see more or less snow. And some regions may actually see about the same amount. But all of this is going to happen in the context of generally warmer weather and a much more voracious water vapor cycle that will be melting all that water and soaking it up and carting it away. To return to the personality analogy, this is going to change the neighborhood quite a lot. It's going to be a lot rougher, if you will. How quickly we come to terms and internalize the fact that the neighborhood has changed will really determine our ability to make our way in this new world. Climate change is more than the sum of its extreme weather parts. We cannot treat extreme weather as a contingency. It's a personality change. It's a change in the nature of the neighborhood we live in and the neighborhood and the neighbor we interact with. The sooner we come to terms with this, the better off we're going to be able to negotiate a constantly changing future and constantly changing future prospects, because they are going to continue to change over every decade for the foreseeable future.